Yesterday, Donald Trump claimed to be king of America. I'd like to preempt any sane washing that will inevitably come from the Fox Newses of the world and the collaborationist liberal media. This is not a joke. This is not a meme. This is the logical conclusion, not only of every action that Donald Trump has taken since the beginning of his new administration, not only of the rhetoric that he's engaged in for at least the last 4 years, but of a decades long strategy by some in the Republican Party who have aspired to give the president enough power to force a radical agenda down the throats of an unwilling nation. If America means anything at all, it means not having a king. There is no king of the United States. There can never be a king of the United States. King and United States of America are two so fundamentally incompatible concepts that if we have a king, our nation, the nation that came into existence on July 4th, 1776, will no longer exist. It will be dead. I believe the world of politics has two layers: the policy layer, the world of tax cuts and credits, the place where all the questions we today associate with the political process exist, and the structural layer, which contains the two most important and fundamental questions of politics: who should rule and why. Because we have been fortunate enough to live in a society with a basically agreed upon structural framework, a constitutional democratic republic, our minds are trapped inside the policy layer. We have no real experience defending the fundamentals of representative democracy and constitutionalism. To most Americans, these ideas are what John Stuart Mill would call dead dogma. The values of self-government and citizenship are taught and memorized, not lived. We might say we believe in them theoretically, but to much of this country, the Constitution provides answers to yesterday's questions. To many Americans, the fundamental questions answered by the American Revolution and the Constitution are only marginally more relevant and alive today than the Code of Hammurabi. So when Americans hear that Trump is claiming to be a king, or that J.D. Vance is saying that it's right for the president to ignore the Supreme Court, or that Elon Musk is installing teenage cadres across the federal government to usurp the power of Congress, too many of us feel that these are fundamentally unserious things. They're jokes, bluffs, non-issues. Anyway, they do not exist within the realm of serious political debate. This is because Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk are not operating within the policy layer of politics, where politics begins and ends for most. They are operating at the structural level, a place almost no Americans alive today have any practical experience going. Leaders and average people that are still operating entirely within the policy layer of politics, people that are only concerned with the mere policy implications of the Trump administration, are now living in a political world that no longer exists. They are being left behind. The goal of the Trump administration is not to pass legislation or enact policy. It is to end the American experiment. They do not believe fundamentally in the shining city on a hill. They do not believe in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. They do not believe that we should have a representative government with checks and balances at all. They believe that we should have a king. So the fundamental questions of politics, who should rule and why, questions that America has not had to consider in a long time, are under consideration again. The debate has been reopened, and the Trump administration, for now, has the advantage of operating on a level that most Americans, including many of our so-called leaders in politics and media, refuse to acknowledge as part of serious politics. This must change, and it will change. As Thomas Paine said, time makes more converts than reason. But why should we even care? For many, it just won't be enough that the post-constitutional world the Trump administration hopes to build, dominated by techno-oligarchs and fundamentally unwell cultural zealots, will simply be much worse than the world that we currently exist in. There needs to be a positive vision, and I sympathize with that. And so, let me ask you to remember the promise of America. Thomas Paine, in Common Sense, said that the cause of America was in a great measure the cause of all mankind. What does that mean, the cause of all mankind? It doesn't mean that we should be conquering Greenland, Canada, and Gaza. It doesn't mean that we should be imperializing the world. What Paine was saying is that the idea of America recognizes that all people possess certain natural rights, that all people have a right to a representative government and aren't required to live under the heel of some crowned tyrant forever and ever. That insight, the idea that all people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that a representative government of, by, and for the people is the way to protect these rights, is the bedrock of this nation. It provided the foundation for every bit of progress, every technological advancement, every victory that this country has ever won. Despotism did not get us to the moon. A king is not responsible for the New York City skyline. The promise of America is liberty. And the strength of that promise was far more powerful than the people that wrote about it in 1776 knew. The promise of America extends farther now, touches more people now, and has accomplished more now than any of our founders could have possibly imagined. Even still, there's more work to do. This nation is not perfect. It will always be a work in progress. Maybe an unintended consequence of the reopening of debate on the structural level of politics will be that there's now an opening to fix so many of the structural problems with our form of government that led us to this point in the first place. If any of this means anything to you, if the promise of America, if the idea of liberty inspires you, I'd ask you to reflect on the fact that it was not given. It was won by generations of Americans who knew what their duty was. Our people, their civic virtue, their ideals. This is the source of our greatness and of all our progress as a nation. If you have $1, flip it over, look at the pyramid. Right below it, there's a banner that says Novus Ordo Seclorum. Novus Ordo Seclorum, new order of the ages. In an age defined by tyranny, by kings, by despotism, in a time where self-government was a laughable concept. 13 colonial backwaters began the world over again. Where in the past people were ruled by right of conquest or an alleged divine right, today more than half the world's nations are some form of democracy, and all but the most stubborn absolute monarchies will at least pretend to have elections. The cause of America is, in a great measure, the cause of all mankind. And America slipping back into the darkness will be a loss to all mankind. So call me an alarmist, call me overly sincere, fine. I am raising the alarm in whatever small measure I can. A year ago, if you predicted that Trump would be openly saying, "Long live the king," you would have called me a cringe resist live alarmist then too. I am sincere. I sincerely believe in the ideas of America, and 15 layers of irony won't save this nation. If the pundits in New York and the politicians in DC refuse to call it like it is, whether it's because they're owned by those who stand to gain from the destruction of this country, or because saying this would get them uninvited from too many very cool cocktail parties, then let the responsibility fall to me, here on my couch, in my apartment, with a laptop and a microphone. Donald Trump won the last election by a hair, but winning an election by any margin does not make you king. Democracy does not mean elective tyranny, regardless of how often the Trump administration says that it does. A representative legislature is more democratic than an elected tyrant because a representative legislature allows even minority opinions to be represented in the lawmaking process. It allows all of the electorate to influence the law rather than just over half, or because of how we elect presidents, sometimes even less than half. There is danger in overreacting, I'll admit that, but there is much greater danger in refusing to acknowledge the truth when you see it. Timidity is too often justified by some as being sensible. I don't care about the professional opinion havers who are paid to tell us how nice the emperor's new clothes look. They have nothing to contribute, and they would be reassuring the captain of the Titanic of its unsinkability from the bottom of the sea. I know what I'm looking at. The president just called himself a king, and America has no king. It is fundamentally insulting to your dignity as a citizen for someone to claim to be king of you. This is a challenge for all of us. For those of you who have the fortune to believe that this administration will not impact you, there is a temptation to ride out the storm, to ignore, to deny the terrible truth that you know full well. If you're one of these people, I'll tell you what Thomas Paine said in The American Crisis. There are cases which cannot be overdone by language, and this is one. There are persons, too, who see not the full extent of the evil which threatens them. They solace themselves with hopes that the enemy, if he succeed, will be merciful. It is the madness of folly to expect mercy from those who have refused to do justice. For those of us with the courage to see what is and what can be rather than what we wish still was, this crisis invites as much opportunity as it does danger. And we should remember that the future will belong only to those with courage. In truth, we should count ourselves lucky as a generation that this moment came to us, that we have the opportunity to shape history instead of just living in its long shadow. What will our legacy be? I believe in this nation's promise, and now I'm putting out this video. This is my message in a bottle to America, from one anonymous citizen to another. I don't know who this will reach, if it reaches anyone. But if you've happened to pluck this video out of the sea of digital soup, then I first want to say thank you for listening. But second, I want you to consider where you stand. It's difficult to see history when you're in it, but ultimately, we will all be judged, and we will judge ourselves for the positions and for the actions that we take now. We all have a responsibility. We all have a duty, and it is up to us. It was always up to us. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. It feels very weird to do YouTube promotional stuff at the end of this, but unfortunately, that's how videos get shown to more people. So I'd encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with a friend. I really appreciate you. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. I'll see you next time.